I was writing a column in the city, and obviously I'd grown up reading Breslin and worshiping him, and I was also going through cancer, and I don't know how he found out. I guess it's a sign of how good of a journalist he was. But he found out that I was going through cancer and that I was going to Sloan Kettering. And I got a call from this guy that I'd never spoken to before saying, "When are you going over there?" And I said, like, what do you mean? He said, "When are you going to that place? I'll go with you." And I was taken aback. And finally, I realized he was talking about Sloan Kettering. And I said, "Well, I'm going there on Thursday for, a kind of serious scan." And he says, "I'll go with you." And so we arranged to meet at 72nd and Broadway. And I'd never met him. I knew what he looked like. And he didn't know what I looked like. So I see him walking up, down Broadway. I introduced myself. He said, "Good, let's go." And so I'm anxious about this scan. It's going to turn out not to be great. And what he does is he just begins talking. He's never met me before, but we have a bond, I guess, in newspaper journalism. And he just starts telling me about boxing matches and Wise Guys and Gotti and, all sorts of crazy things. He's cursing up a storm. Every other word is the F-bomb. And suddenly I'm in front of Sloan Kettering, and all my nerves had just kind of gone away for a little while. And he says, "When's your wife getting here? She should be here." And I said, "Well, she'll be right here in a minute." And she comes around the corner. From then on, he never uses another F-bomb. We go into the hospital, and I'm saying, "Thank you, Mr. Breslin. Thanks so much. I'll go with you." He goes with me up to the lab, basically. He's there when I get into my Johnny. I get into my Johnny. I go into this small room, and there's my wife, and there's Breslin. There's Jimmy Breslin, and the room is the size of like a closet. And it goes on, and he keeps making jokes with the nurses, and really kind of like providing great distraction. And the joke is that I finally get on the gurney, and I'm on the gurney, and Breslin's still there. And the joke is that I made room for him. But he finally goes, and it's not great. And the next day I'm walking around the city feeling sorry for myself, and he calls me. "What do you got for tomorrow?" Meaning my column. I said, "Jimmy, I was thinking of not writing. I think I needed a break." And he uses the bad word again. And he says, basically, "Screw that. Look around. Look at the pavement. Everywhere you go, a story. Write. Goodbye." That's what happened.
My first introduction to Jimmy Breslin was when I would get off the train at Kenmore Station in Boston, Massachusetts, the trolley, on the way to BU, where I attended college for a couple of years. And I would stop and pick up the New York Herald Tribune at the newsstand and read this guy. And Dick Schaap was in the Herald Tribune, and John Crosby and Art Bookwald. But Breslin, his stuff would jump off the page. So fast forward several years, and it's the fall of 1974, and Boston has begun to implement school busing, and the sidewalks are aflame with violence. And Tom Winship, the editor of the Globe, one of his specialties, he was a wonderful man and an incredible editor, and I loved him to death. But one of his specialties was to try and put scorpions in a bottle to see which one would survive. So lo and behold, in mid-September 1974, who shows up as a guest columnist for the Boston Globe in the newsroom? One Jimmy Breslin. And it was like, oh my God, this is going to be terrible for me, for everyone. And so he wrote a piece one day, and I was writing a piece on the same day that he was going to write. This was like for a Sunday paper. And I wrote what I wrote. He wrote what he wrote, and I was shaking. He sat in the newsroom with us. He was about 2 desks away from me. Both pieces appeared in the Sunday paper. Monday, I go back to work in the morning trying to figure out what I'm going to do for the day. Breslin is there already before me. And he comes up to me and he says, "Hey, kid, you're making me play an away game, huh?" That's okay. Good for you. Good for you. And that was my introduction to him in person.
I'm going to tell a couple of quick ones because he and Pete Hamill, their office was about 100 feet down from the sports department at the Daily News. So it's just, you know, I'm like 12 years old and I can go down and talk to these guys who all I'd ever wanted to be was them. But I had just started writing a column at the Daily News, and Dick Young had grown increasingly. Help me out here, Mike. Cantankerous.
He was pissed off at you, Mike.
Yeah,
He was jealous of you.
So he's killing Dan, you remember, he's killing Tom Seaver day after day after day. So my first column, I defended Seaver. And Young was also the sports editor at the time. And so he calls me into his office and he said, I'm not going to get into a pissing contest with a member of my own staff. And I said, well, Mr. Young, you have a column, I have a column. I was told to write what I thought and what I believed. And he said, you're not doing that here. So I go down the hall to Breslin and I tell him what just happened. He grabs me by the arm. He walks me through the city room. He walks me down to Mike O'Neill's office. He was the editor of the Daily News at the time. He walks past O'Neill's assistant. And Mike could have been talking to Jesus at the time, and Breslin didn't care. He goes barging into his office and he said, tell him what you just told me. And I said, well, Mr. O'Neill, here's what just happened. And Mike said, you write whatever you want to write. And if anybody screws you again, come to me. But it wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have empowered me if Jimmy's standing as Jimmy Breslin hadn't gotten me through that moment.